Hello, everyone. How are you? Hope you're doing well. My name is Carl. Welcome to this webinar on behalf of the TEFL org. I'm a teacher trainer. I'm an EFL teacher. I teach online. I've taught face-to-face as well. I do lots of examining work. I've been lucky enough to have taught in many countries around the world. I've taught in Spain, Italy, China, Kazakhstan, Vietnam, Iraq, Azerbaijan. So hopefully I can be here today to host this live webinar and get any questions you might have about teaching English as a foreign language. Please do let me know where you are in the world. As I said, I'm in Belfast, Northern Ireland, where I do some of the practical courses for the TEFL org. So if you want to spend a weekend learning a bit about teaching English as a foreign language in Ireland, you might spend the weekend with me, luckily or unluckily. Nancy is in. She's from Sicily. Hi, how you doing, Nancy? David is also here in Lincolnshire. I can see some more hellos coming in. It's good to see some names. We haven't done these for a couple of weeks, so it is great to get everyone back on board. Please do say hello, because you never know, you might find a TEFL friend. Right. Okay. Oh, the other thing I should say is get any questions you have about teaching English as a foreign language into the chat on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever it is you're watching. I will get round to any of those questions you have. Doesn't have to be about our topic, which is about ESA lessons today. It doesn't have to be about that. It can be about that, but it can be about anything at all about teaching English as a foreign language. Maybe you want to be a teacher, you want to travel somewhere, something like that. I will do my best to answer it, or if not, Alan, who is monitoring the chat, will do his best to answer it. Right. All the hellos are coming in. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Right. So the topic of today's webinar is how to write an ESA lesson plan. Right. What does ESA stand for? So basically it's 3 letters and it stands for 3 general stages of a lesson, which is engage, study, and activate. Now, it's not necessarily the things that I'm going to talk about in the next sort of slides, they might not be necessarily new to you, but what might be new is sort of the order that they do it or the structure. But what you'll tend to find, hopefully, is that you'll see similarities between the way you teach or the way you have been taught to teach or you've learned to teach on a course. Hopefully, you'll see some similarities between engage, study, and activate and yourself and how you want to be a teacher. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the theory behind ESA lessons. So there is quite a big focus within the theory, and the gentleman that made it up is a gentleman called Harmer, and he said that he wanted classes to be quite fun and quite relaxed. Now, hopefully your classes are fun and relaxed anyway. So hopefully this isn't something that's new to you. Think, oh, all of a sudden I have to, oh, okay, if I want to be an ESA teacher, I have to be fun and relaxed. Generally, all good language learning classes are quite fun and relaxed. But this theory was made sort of as a counter to previous styles of learning languages, which were seen as not very fun and not very relaxed. I remember when I learnt French, I had a very strict, unfriendly teacher. I absolutely hated it. And this is sort of an answer to those sort of classes that you might have had. I mean, please do put in the chat if you do fun and relaxed classes, or maybe if you had teachers in the past that weren't fun and relaxed. Do let us know about anything like that you might have got. And ESA tends to encourage the students to be active. Again, this isn't something that you probably wouldn't do in the classroom. You know, hopefully when you teach or when you want to teach, if you're thinking of becoming a teacher, you want the students to be active and you'd want the students to be talking quite a bit. And by active, it doesn't mean sort of running around, physically moving around. You might do a bit of that in the classroom, but generally, you know, getting them talking, getting them thinking, using the language, okay? The other thing about an ESA is that the teachers have a little bit of flexibility in terms of the ordering of the stages. This is something that I'm going to come to towards the end of the presentation, but it does allow teachers to have a bit more freedom in sort of what they're going to teach in the study side of things, which I'm going to show you again in a minute. There is also an emphasis on students using the language meaningfully. So that means using the language in sort of a real world situation. And again, hopefully this is something that you'll bring into your own teaching, or you do anyway. But a lot of language lessons still taught around the world have quite a strong grammar focus, where they're looking quite often at things like, making sure that the grammar is accurate, or passing grammar tests, that kind of thing. ESA doesn't really want to do that. ESA is sort of getting, right, okay, this is the language that we're going to study. We're going to study this grammar point, and then we're going to use that in a situation that you would use in the real world, such as buying something, asking for something, selling something, whatever it might be. So that tends to be the theory behind it. And I think, this all sounds quite positive. This is the sort of teacher that I want to be, and this is the sort of thing that hopefully you want to do. Right, so let's look at the engage stage of things. So if you're sort of thinking about traditional terms that you might have learnt before, this is sort of similar to sort of a warmer stage of a lesson. So, it's when the students come in, they sit down, and you kind of want to get them warm. You want to get them quite talking in the language. You want to get them sort of a bit active and speaking. Right. So what the idea of this stage is to generally get them interested within the topic. So if you're going to do a topic about a lesson about holidays, and you're going to do some certain grammar points in it, you would get them talking, you get them thinking, you get them engaging in the topic of holidays. Before you've taught any grammar, before you've taught any specialized vocabulary, you just get them happy, you get them thinking, oh, this is nice. Also, ideally, you would try to get them sort of thinking about it emotionally. So, thinking about things that make them happy or things that make them sad, just to get them sort of inspired by the topic a little bit. The activities in this stage should be quite communicative. So, it's not sitting down and writing. It should be them speaking. It should be them discussing. It should be them, working together, working in groups, that kind of thing. And ideally trying to have a bit of fun in the engage section. So how to have sort of fun. The idea behind it is to play some games in this section, to tell a story, to listen to a story, to just in pairs tell a quick little story that they have, something like that. Listen to some music, or look at some pictures. It could be as simple as you write a little discussion question on the board, something like that. But really, the theory behind ESA is to get them really quite emotionally and happily attached to the topic. And the theory goes that these ones are a good way of doing it. And there's not some sort of special games, I should say, that are used in ESA, or some special stories. These, you can do activities around games. You can play games that you've done before, but you might play some games and listen to some music. You might stretch it out a bit, the engage section. And you've got to try and get the students at somehow linking the topic to themselves in the engagement. So it's not just talking generally about holidays, talking about holiday that they went on, something like that. Okay. Right. Then there's the study section. And this is where you sort of do your teaching. This is where you are introducing the target language or the target skills of the lesson. So by language, I mean target grammar that you might be teaching, or target vocabulary. Skills, it could be, if you're trying to do presentation skills, or if you're trying to do writing skills, or even if you're sort of trying to do a bit of listening and speaking. You would probably do a bit of both. So you do one productive skill and one receptive skill. And within that, there's lots of different sub-skills. We've done webinars about skills. So the teacher can introduce this language, and they can practice it in different ways. Now, this is sort of similar to the practice side of a PPP lesson. So yes, you might be a teacher in the ESA lesson. We're standing at the board teaching something, but probably because we're trying to be more communicative, you might be getting them to discover it themselves. You might be getting them to work together with some worksheets, that kind of thing. Ideally, not standing at a board teaching, but that does happen as well in an ESA lesson. So you can present on the board, as I said, but you could also get some little activities, whether they do gap fills, you could do pronunciation drilling, You could do group discovery work where they have a text, they have to read the text and have to find some things, work together, that kind of thing. And different sort of text, including the sort of listening text as well, listening clips as well. So there's different ways of doing it, but it's like the practice side of the PPP lesson. There is in this stage a focus on language and there's a focus on accuracy. So ESA, yes, it's quite freeing in terms of getting the students to be communicative and to be a bit more relaxed, but there is still a focus on the language and the accuracy side of things. Please do get your questions in. I can see some already coming in. It'd be great to get to some right by the end of this presentation. Right, activate. So we've done the E and done the S. Here's the A side of things. So this is sort of where they're trying to produce the language, okay? So the aim of this stage is to use the language in a relevant and useful way. So the language that you've taught in the S stage of things, they now take that and they might still have it on the board. They might have it in a worksheet. They might have made some notes. They use that vocabulary you've taught or the skills that you've taught or the grammar that you've taught, and now they try and use it together, talking to other people. And yeah, they should really build on the language that they've learned. So use the language they've learned or build on previous lessons. That's the kind of theory behind it. And activities that could be used in this stage are things like role plays, things like discussions, stories, letter writing. So role plays where you give them a setting and you say, you're a customer, you're a salesperson. What would the topic be? Or your two friends here, you discuss this. Discussions, it could be something like you put a question, do you agree or disagree? Something like that on the board and they discuss it. Stories, they could write a story. They could then act out the story. They could write a letter to each other, something like that. They're activating using the language that they've learned. And in this stage, the teacher is sort of checking for the language use. So making sure that they're using what you've taught them in the study section, and you're also error correcting. You're making sure that they are correcting the right errors and they're making accuracy correct, basically. Right. So that is in its basic form an ESA lesson. Okay, they're the three different stages. Now, but it doesn't always have to go ESA end of lesson. There are different ways of doing an ESA lesson. And the reason they like the owner of this, the creator of this theory, was because they think it's a good idea to mix it up with your students. You not always want to do the same way. And if you do start with a E, then you do an S, then you do an A, that is called a straight arrow lesson. So you go through the steps straight through. You do an E, you do an S, you do an A. Okay. But there is also something called a Boomerang ESA. So a boomerang doesn't go straight. A boomerang sort of goes round in an arc and then comes back. And then you might throw it again and it goes around and it comes back. And here you might do something like you engage them. Then you do the activity side of things. Then you do the study. Then you go back to the A. And the theory behind this is you get them thinking about it. You then give them some sort of real world activity and you notice what they're doing is you're correcting the errors. You're listening. You're thinking, okay, now you remember you haven't really taught them anything. They haven't done the study side of things yet, but you're walking around. You're saying, okay, they can't do that past tense or they're making that vocabulary mistake there. Then you teach it. You then do a study thing. So then you're at the board with the errors and you're saying, okay, these are your errors. This is what we're going to do. Look at this. Okay. Now repeat that activity again. See how you do it, remembering the errors that you did the first time round. So there's quite a bit of an emphasis on the teacher here. Okay. Then there's also a way called a patchwork. And the whole thing about the patchwork is you start with the E, you finish with the A, but in between it, you might do 3 or 4 more E's. You might do another, you might do an A, you might do a couple of different studies. But as long as the start and the end match your goals, that's okay. Whatever happens in between, as you mix it up, that's how it works. and talk a bit about this now. So straight ESA. So first of all, you engage. This would be sort of an example lesson that I might do with a straight ESA lesson. So you could show a video of an intro to a country, for example. So you get them all to sit down, you watch this video, and you sort of something. Okay, did you like that one? Have you? Did you? And then you might have some discussion questions underneath that you put on the board, saying things like, Did you like this video? Have you visited this country? Would you like to visit this country? What similarities can you see with your country? That kind of thing. Get them thinking about it. Then you do some sort of study where you look at some vocabulary around describing countries. Okay. So right, today we're going to look at this specific. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about, and it could be things like statistics. It could be ways of describing the country. It could be the locations, something like that. And then you do an activate, and the students work together to present a country or to create their own perfect country using some of the vocabulary that you've done there. Okay, that would be a straight arrow ESA lesson. Okay, and that might take half an hour, that might take an hour, depending on the level, depending on how long you've got, that kind of thing. Right, a boomerang ESA lesson. So you would engage them, giving you a different topic. You could do a discussion about shopping. So you could show a video about some different types of shops. You could show a video about a company. You could put some discussion questions up about, like, where do you like going shopping? What don't you like shopping for? Who is the best shopper in your family? Things like this. Discussion about shopping. Then you could do some sort of activate where they have to do a role play about problem about shopping. So you put them in pairs. You're the shopkeeper. You're the customer. You bought this last week. There was a problem with it. You have to try and fix a problem. Something like that. Again, you haven't taught them. You haven't studied anything. You're then listening to the role play, and you work out what they're having issues with. The teacher then corrects and teaches the errors that they've heard about the shopping. Okay, they didn't know the vocabulary for buying things. They didn't know the vocabulary for how to get something fixed or refunds, whatever it might be. They then repeat the role play and hopefully won't repeat the errors because you've taught them those there. So you can see here there's a bit of an emphasis on the teacher for listening, making sure that there's any errors, and then they go for it like that. Right, a patchwork ESA lesson. So engage. The students might look at some photos from around their town that you might put on the board, or you might ask them to look on their phones for any photos they've taken around their town. And you can say, what do you like? What do you dislike about your town? What are good places? What are bad places about the town? Okay. Then you do an activate, and you role play of a tourist in the town. So you say, right, okay, you're a tourist. You're meeting the tourist in your town. The tourist has some questions about your town, where to go, what to do, that kind of thing. The teacher then covers the heard errors. They say, okay, there were some problems with this, there's some problems with that. Put it on the board, something like that. Do some gap fills. So you've got to think on your feet, like that kind of thing. Then you engage. The students make a leaflet about the town. So they work together to talk about, like, the good things about the town, put it on a poster, something like that. You're looking at any errors they've got as they're writing. You then teach those errors. Teacher teach the errors. Then the students then would maybe go back and fix those errors. Or you could then move on to an activate stage where they have to make an advert about their town. They could go around and film it for the homework, something like that. Or you could just get them to pretend at the front of the stage that they're making an advert, something like that. So you can see here, there's different ways, and you might have more of those in between. But really what the teacher has to think about is these big activities, these big activate stages. And then the teacher has to sort of be on their toes and be in there listening, really sort of not involved in making and doing the activities, but involved in listening and monitoring a lot to cover the errors. Okay. Right, here are some of my thoughts about ESA. Please do get them any questions you have. We're going to get to them in a second. So it is similar in some ways to PPP. The PPP tends to be quite strict. We've done a webinar about PPP, so it might be worth looking at. The ESA gives you a bit of leeway in between to go around, okay? But it is sort of similar in some ways to PPP. But I think that there are things in the methodology that you can take into the ESA, so into PPP. So you could do real life activities in PPP. You should hopefully be engaging and put activities up that are good for them. Yeah. This kind of thing is useful and you can take it. Don't just think in PPP you have to be quite strict. No, hopefully you're doing the good positive things from ESA within your PPP. There is quite a big emphasis on the teacher in the study phase. So you are really going to have to be knowing your stuff about any errors that they might have. So it probably is better for a slightly more experienced teacher. PPP is great for beginner teachers. ESA might be after you've been teaching a while and you feel a bit more confident, you've covered a few grammar points, that kind of thing. All right. ESA can be a bit trickier with lower levels. So you might find that you're doing loads of different activities. So Patchwork might be more suitable for lower levels than the other straight arrow or the Boomerang. The reason being is that with low levels, you might have to do lots of quick activities because they don't have enough language skills in order to in order to spend enough time to fill the hour, 2 hours that you're doing. There's loads of stuff online about ESA, so it's worth Googling, it's worth looking at. I think it works well for experienced teachers. For beginner teachers, I would start with the PPP side of things. Okay. Thank you. Please do put your questions in. I can see some great ones coming in already. Okay, right. Okay, thank you. Sorry, just pushed the wrong one there. Right. Okay, so let me go to your first question. All the hellos. Thank you very much. Okay. Right. Plague von Karma. Hi. How are you doing? So you've noticed that the grammar focus is more frequent in countries where English isn't a lingua franca. Okay. Interesting one. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's about ones where English isn't a lingua franca. I think that there is quite a strong grammar focus in big parts of the world. And the reason why there is, before I actually answer your question, the reason why I think that there is quite a big grammar focus is it's quite hard for teachers, local teachers, so teachers that are, so for example, in Turkey, a Turkish teacher that has gone through Turkish high school, gone through Turkish university, it's quite hard for them to change what they learned at school and what they learned maybe at university. So they've come out of university as an English teacher, and if they had spent the last 10, 20 years, whatever it is, at school, learning grammar lessons, they feel that they need to teach grammar lessons. It takes a lot of outside thought and teacher training to get them. Okay. I have taught in many places where there's a grammar focus. Vietnam had a bit of a grammar focus for the students at high school. So I worked at a university. The students came out of it wanting quite expecting a grammar focused lesson, but they sort of went to a university where it was more skills based. In China, I found it was similar. It's changing a bit in China, but I found it a bit in China. Japan for sure is very grammar focused, and Japan spends a lot of money trying to train teachers up, and it hasn't made a huge amount of difference, although I haven't lived there for sort of 10, 12 years. So maybe it's a bit better now. I don't know. Language schools, private language schools should be different from schools or universities in that they can be a bit freer because they've got to hit a curriculum, and they can't, you should be able to, if you go work there, teach skills and that kind of thing. Now, grammar is useful. I think functions are more useful. I think skills lessons are more useful, but you can't do it without basic grammar lessons. If by function, if you can get your point across, if you can complete the task that you're aiming to do, but your grammar's wrong, then you've still completed it, you're still successful. but are you a good language speaker or a language user? The other thing why grammar focus is quite in these countries is that it's quite easy to grade grammar. Students at the end of a year can do a grammar test. It's right, it's wrong. They haven't got to be judged for speaking. They haven't got to be judged for writing. We know that many countries like exams, so they keep doing grammar tests. I hope that answers your question. I think we went off a big theory there, didn't we? I liked it. David, hi. What real life role plays do you find are most popular with the students? So ones that are applicable to them. So kids, young learners, teens. Let's start with teens because there's a big difference between that, right? So young learners, they like role plays where they're talking about things that they are interested in. So could be role plays of talking about football, could be role plays talking about music, could be role plays talking about film stars, whatever it might be, where one's a film star, one's not, they're being interviewed, that kind of thing. I find that quite useful. I think that they find that quite interesting and they get involved in. Young kids sort of done 8, 9, 10 kids, kids aged 8, 9, 10, they quite like role plays where they're going to shops. Oh yes, please, I would like to buy, or things like that. And they, dealing with the change, the numbers, that kind of thing. They like. Adults, they quite like role plays where they're going to be tourists because a lot of them are learning to be tourists. They also like role plays of sort of living in other countries. They like role plays of going to study at university. If they're studying business English, there's lots of role plays you could do around business English, transactional, selling, that kind of thing. So it really doesn't depend on what the class is that you're teaching and the age range. There's loads of different things. So think of real life situations where you speak English or you have done in the past and see if you can bring them into the classroom, David. Hope that answers your questions. Right, my personal favorite ways to use ESA. I think it works best with sort of pre-intermediate adults and up. I don't think it works quite as well with kids. I think with kids, you want to have the sort of structure of in the study section, at least knowing what you're going to do, because you want to be able to know what you're going to be able to do with kids, because you need to have lots of activities generally within a kid's lesson, especially with younger kids. With higher level adults, mid to higher level adults, they have the language ability to do real world role plays. Their role plays can last a bit longer. They have the language to write for longer, to speak for longer, and that kind of thing. So it really works. I think the general themes where it work better are just sort of ones that are real world activities. So the ones that I sort of just spoke about with David. So themes where you can teach some grammar and then use it in a situation where they could see themselves actually using it. Or if you could then go to a bit of a cultural thing to say, okay, this is how it is done in my country. So this is this is the sort of transaction we're going to do. Okay. Rick, hi. What's the best strategy for monitoring students when there are a large number of students in the class? So it's a tricky one, this, because if you have only got 3 or 4 minutes to monitor them and you've got 40 students, it is tricky to walk around the whole class and get around them. If you've got a big class, you might want to do more of a patchwork style ESA, because then there's lots of different activities and then you can get around them all. So in the first activity, you're around the bottom right section of the classroom. The next section, you're up the top right, then the top left, and then the bottom left, whatever it might be. You might mix around. What I do is I have a piece of paper and I go around and I write down the errors that I hear. So if I am listening and they're really, really good, I quickly move on because I want to find some errors. So I write down, okay, so they said off the top of my head, yesterday I eat a pizza. You heard that. You know it should be yesterday I ate a pizza. You write down, yesterday I eat a pizza. You then go on and you hear the wrong preposition. You write that down. The end of activity, you go to the board. You write down 5 or 6 errors you've heard. You might then go in and teach them. You might say, okay, right, so eat is a past tense irregular verb. We have to change it to ate. Or a better way would be said, does anyone know what the past tense of eat is? Tell your partner, blah, blah, blah. You then put that on the board. then have these 5 errors. You say, okay, right, with your partner, work together, fix the errors. Can you use these error words in other sentences? Talk to your partner. Great. Now do that activity again. So you just sort of find in 5 or 6, you write them down as you go round. Okay. David, hi. Are most of the classes you have taken usually an hour long? No. So let's think about this. I've had classes that are 5 hours long. Now, what you might do is split that into 5 different lessons. So you might have an hour lesson or an hour and a half lesson, split into 3 or 4, and you just do that. I've had lessons which are 2.5 hours. So every school sort of is slightly different. I do lessons where I've worked in universities where you do 2 hours of reading, then you do 2 hours of listening, then they go home the next morning and do 2 hours of speaking, 2 hours of writing. So it really does depend on what the timetable is for the school that you're going to work at, or the university or the language school. So not usually how long. I tend to like to think in hours and think, okay, if I can get this done within an hour, but if I know that I'm going to have them for an hour and a half, that gives me more time to sort of go off and do some things. The problem with the ESA is that it might take you a bit longer to do the study section than you would think about. So that way you are it's a bit harder to judge. But there's that flexibility within it. You might not do that second. If you're doing a patchwork, you might not do that second or third activity. Really does depend on the school that you're going to go work at. Okay. Good luck. David, hi. You have a business background. Do you think simple business case study would be interesting for language class? So there's a type of teaching of English called English business English teaching. Sorry, I totally had a brain freeze then. So a company, if you have a business background, if you go and apply for a language school somewhere in the world. So for example, in Japan, I taught business English classes. I taught classes. The language school took me on as a teacher. I taught some kids. I taught some general English, but I also had business English classes where I went to a company and I helped that company to improve the way that they replied to emails from customers, basically. So I looked at the type of emails they were getting in English. The Japanese people needed to structure them in a way that the American business people wanted to hear it, that kind of thing, making sure that they had the right language to introduce themselves via email and formality and informality. And I taught that in. So you would be a shoo-in. Schools love taking on business English teachers because business English classes make a bit more money than general English classes. So they would happily take you on, I'm sure. Universities around the world will hopefully also take you on because a lot of students are learning business. They're learning English in order to be business, to do a business degree or an economics degree. You would be great for that kind of thing. Right. Case studies. Yeah. So for example, I'm not a business background. You do a case study on Apple, the history of Apple, the size of Apple, the marketing schemes of Apple, that kind of thing. They would probably like that, but I would say that could be as advanced as you make it. If you're going to write it yourself, you could use quite simple vocabulary. They could do that. If you're find something off, I don't know, a business newspaper, something like that, that could be a little bit too advanced for me. You might want to change some of the vocabulary in it. So you can make it as hard or as difficult as you want it, as hard or as easy as you want it to be, basically, David. Hi, Rick. Right. So I've done whole webinars where I talk about PPP. Basically, so it might be worth thinking about that. Basically, you present the grammar somehow or the language somehow. You then practice it, and then you produce it. Basically, it's worth looking at it and just see how you go with that. You'll see that the stages are similar, but it might just be a bit more strict. But worth looking at about that one. Okay, the one that I've done before. John, is Cambodia grammar focused too? Yeah, generally Southeast Asia, around there, they are quite grammar focused. That doesn't mean that you have to be. Okay. you can go in there and be the vocabulary guy, the pronunciation guy. You can go in there and be the skills guy. Also does depend on the school that's taking you on. So you're off to Cambodia in October. Tips on Cambodian education. So there's lots of you'll probably go work for a private language school in Cambodia. You'll enjoy it. Cambodia is a great place. So if you haven't been before, if you have been before, you know how great it is. So language schools, there's quite a business English focus in Cambodia at the moment. There's, it's quite a rapidly growing country. So they want to get people get people making money. So you probably go work for a language school. There will be kids classes. You can go and have fun there. That you'll be sitting in front of a group of 20 kids teaching them grammar. You'd be getting them up and having fun, that kind of thing. Teens, adults, you would again be doing general English probably. So you're not necessarily going to be doing grammar. You'd be teaching writing, teaching speaking, teaching listening, teaching reading, skill focus, having fun. But the students that come into you might have had lots of grammar, and they have got the grammar in there. So what they don't actually want is John Beeson to stand at the front saying, okay, today we're going to do the present perfect. I have, you have, he has, she has, they have. You don't want that kind of thing. What they want for you is to go in there and get them using that, error correcting them, making sure they're doing it right, correcting their pronunciation, because a lot of Southeast Asia has terrible pronunciation. Getting you to actually show, okay, right, this is where we use the present perfect. This is where we use the past simple, that kind of thing. Real life situations. That's what they want. They already know the grammar. They want you to make sure that they're doing it correctly. Yeah. Thank you. I think that's all the questions. I think that might be all of them. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you did find that useful. There's loads of stuff online about ESA, so worth having a look at it. Again, it's not something that's wildly different to hopefully how you want to teach, but it might be something that you might want to think, okay, I quite like this idea of a patchwork of going back and forward and doing different parts of it together and just see how that works out for you. If you have got any questions, please do put them in the chat. They come up on our board. Also, you can send us a message. You go on our website, tefl.org. There's a chat with us function at the bottom. We also have a TEFL group. There's loads of people in that who can answer any questions. I monitor that as well, and I monitor that. We jump in if there's any questions. People do post jobs in there as well. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that one. Good to see you. Thanks for coming, and hopefully see you again.